I didn't plan on staying. The job was supposed to take 2 days, maybe 3 if the weather turned bad. Drive out, fix a busted fiber line, reboot a couple of ancient routers, get the locals back online so they could complain on Facebook again. Then I'd be gone, back to my apartment, back to my life. That was the plan. But plans have a funny way of unraveling the moment you meet the wrong or maybe the right person. The village didn't even have a proper name on most maps. Just a cluster of houses, a single general store, and one crooked road that disappeared into pine forest in both directions. No signal bars on my phone, not even fake ones. The kind of place where silence feels loud. I remember laughing to myself as I drove in, thinking, of course the internet's broken here. It probably never worked in the first place. I was still amused when I parked the van near the only building with a visible router antenna sticking out of the roof. I grabbed my toolkit, stepped out into the cold air, and that's when I saw him. Elliot. He was standing near the fence across the road, sleeves rolled up, hands dirty like he'd been working on something physical and stubborn. Tall, broad shoulders, but not in a gym way, more like life had shaped him that way. Dark hair, a bit messy, like he didn't bother fighting it anymore. He looked up when the van door slammed, and our eyes met. And something in my chest shifted. Not dramatically, not like lightning or fireworks. Just a quiet awareness. The kind that makes you pause half a second longer than necessary. "You must be the internet guy," he called out. His voice was lower than I expected. Calm. Friendly. Not the suspicious tone I usually got in places like this. "Yeah," I said, forcing myself back into motion. "Joseph." "Elliot." He wiped his hands on his jeans and walked closer. "You're brave, coming out here alone." I smirked. "That bad, huh?" He smiled back, but there was something knowing in it. "You'll see." The first few hours were exactly what I expected. Cold fingers, outdated equipment, cables that looked like they'd been installed sometime before I was born. The connection was unstable, the main line half-chewed by animals or weather or both. I lost track of time until the sun dipped low and the temperature dropped fast. I was crouched near an open junction box when Elliot showed up again, this time holding 2 steaming mugs. "Thought you might need this," he said, handing one to me. "Coffee. Strong. Black." I looked up at him, genuinely surprised. "You didn't have to." He shrugged. "You're keeping us connected to the world. Least I can do." Our fingers brushed when I took the mug. Just barely. But I felt it. A spark of warmth that had nothing to do with the coffee. "So," he said, leaning against the fence, watching me work. "You live far from here." "In the city," I replied. "This is very different." He laughed softly. "That's one way to put it. I should have packed up when it got dark. I should have driven back to the motel an hour away. Instead, I stayed. Talking. Listening. Letting Elliot tell me about the village, about why he came back after years away, about how quiet can be comforting if you let it. When my phone buzzed one week, bar flickering to Li-Fi, checked the message from my boss. "Line's worse than we thought. Might take longer. Stay put." I stared at the screen, then looked up at Elliot. "Looks like I'm stuck here a bit longer," I said. He held my gaze, that same calm intensity, and smiled. "Guess the village isn't done with you yet." I didn't know it then, but neither was he. That night, Elliot insisted I stay at his place. Not in a pushy way, more like it was the most obvious solution in the world. "The motel's barely heated," he said as we stood by my van. "And it's a 40-minute drive on a road that turns into ice after sunset. I've got a spare room." Every sensible instinct told me I should politely decline. Professional boundaries, common sense, the tiny voice that reminded me I didn't actually know this man. Instead, I found myself nodding. "Yeah," I said. "Okay, just for the night." His house was a few minutes down the road, tucked behind a line of trees like it was trying not to be noticed. Inside, it was warm in that quiet, lived-in way. Wood floors, old furniture, the faint smell of coffee, and something earthy, maybe firewood. He showed me the spare room, simple but clean. Then we ended up in the kitchen, standing across from each other like 2 people unsure how close was too close. "You hungry?" he asked. I hadn't realized how starved I was until then. "Yeah, kind of." He cooked like someone who didn't follow recipes, confident, intuitive. We ate at a small table, knees occasionally brushing. Every time it happened, neither of us moved away. Conversation flowed easier than I expected. No awkward silences. No need to impress. Just stories, mine about clients and city chaos, his about village life and why he left and why he came back. Didn't work out? I asked carefully. He stared into his mug for a moment. Something like that. I didn't push. Somehow, that felt important. Later, we sat on the couch, a quiet movie playing more as background noise than entertainment. The room was dim, lit only by a lamp in the corner. I was aware of him beside me in a way that felt almost physical, like gravity. When our shoulders finally touched, it felt deliberate, not accidental. "You okay?" he asked quietly. "Yeah," I said. "You?" He smiled, small and sincere. "Yeah. Nothing happened that night." Not really. But when I lay in bed later, staring at the unfamiliar ceiling, my mind wouldn't slow down. The way he looked at me, the way his voice softened when he said my name, the ease of being around him. The next morning, the village woke up early. I went back to work, and Elliot tagged along, helping where he could, holding cables, handing me tools, asking questions that told me he was genuinely interested, not just being polite. By afternoon, the internet was half stable. By evening, the weather turned. Snow started falling hard and fast, blanketing the road in white. My boss called again. "Forget it," he said. "You're not driving out in that. Finish tomorrow." I hung up and laughed, shaking my head. Guess I'm really stuck now. Elliot watched the snow through the window. Could be worse. I looked at him, at the way the cold light framed his face, and realized something that made my chest tighten. I didn't want to leave, and that realization scared me way more than being stranded ever could. That night, as we sat closer than before, the silence between us felt charged, like something was waiting to be said or done. When his hand finally rested over mine, neither of us pretended it was an accident. His hand was warm. That was the first thing I noticed. Not the fact that he was touching me, not the way my heart jumped into my throat, but the simple, grounding warmth of his palm over mine, like he'd been there longer than he actually had. I didn't pull away. Neither did he. We sat like that for a while, the movie forgotten, snow tapping softly against the windows. The village felt even more cut off now, like the world had shrunk down to just this room, this couch, this quiet, understanding humming between us. "Joseph," he said eventually, my name low and careful, like he was testing how it sounded. "I don't want to make this weird." I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. "Too late," I said, then smiled so he'd know I was joking. "Mostly." He chuckled, squeezing my hand slightly. "I mean, you're here for work. And I don't usually dash." He stopped, shook his head. "I don't usually feel this way." That made two of us. I didn't expect this either, I admitted. I came out here thinking about cables and signal strength. Not whatever this is. Our eyes met, and this time neither of us looked away. Elliot leaned in first, slowly, giving me every chance to stop him. When our lips finally touched, it was gentle, almost tentative, like we were both afraid of breaking something fragile. The kiss was brief, soft, but it rewired something inside me. When we pulled back, he rested his forehead against mine. "Okay," he murmured. "So that happened." "Yeah," I said. "It did." We didn't rush anything after that. No dramatic confessions. No rushing upstairs. Just closeness. His arm around me. My head against his shoulder. The kind of intimacy that sneaks up on you and settles in quietly. The next few days blurred together in a way that felt unreal. Mornings fixing connections, afternoons testing speeds and replacing lines, evenings back at Elliot's place. Cooking together. Talking longer than planned. Learning each other's habits without trying. I learned he woke up early, even when he didn't need to. That he liked his coffee too strong. That he'd left the city because he'd fallen in love with someone who couldn't love him back, not openly, not fully. He learned I'd never stayed anywhere long. That my job was a convenient excuse for running. That I told myself I liked freedom more than roots. One night, while we were washing dishes side by side, he said, "You know you'll leave eventually." It wasn't accusatory, just honest. "Yeah," I said quietly. "I know." He nodded, jaw tightening just a little. I just wanted to say it out loud. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just a detour. This wasn't just a snowy weekend story I'd tell later with a shrug. This was something that was going to hurt either way. The internet was fully restored by the end of the week. My boss called, cheerful and oblivious. "Good work," he said. "Head back tomorrow." I hung up and stared at the phone for a long time. That evening, Elliot and I sat on the porch, wrapped in blankets, watching the sky darken over the trees. "I leave in the morning," I said. He didn't look at me right away. I figured. Silence stretched between us, heavy but not hostile. "I don't know what this means," I continued. But I know it means more than I expected. He finally turned to me. I steady, vulnerable. Then don't disappear. I swallowed hard. I won't. I just didn't know yet how much that promise would cost me. I barely slept that night. Not because Elliot was beside me, he wasn't, but because the idea of not waking up in that house anymore felt heavier than I expected. Every creak of the wood, every gust of wind outside, felt like something I needed to memorize before it disappeared. Morning came too fast. We didn't say much while I packed my things. The quiet wasn't awkward, just thick. Like both of us were afraid that if we spoke too freely, something would break beyond repair. Elliot leaned against the doorway while I zipped my bag. "So," he said, trying for casual and not quite succeeding. "Guess this is it." "For now," I replied. I wanted to believe that part. He walked me out to the van. Snow crunched under our boots. The village looked untouched, frozen in time, like it didn't care whether I stayed or left. I turned to him, suddenly unsure what the right goodbye even looked like. He solved it for me by stepping closer and pulling me into a hug. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't restrained either. Just firm, grounding, like he was anchoring me there for one last second. I inhaled the scent of his jacket, wood smoke and cold air, and felt my chest ache. "Call me when you get signal," he said quietly. "I will. I mean it, Joseph." "I know," I said. "So do I." He kissed me, then slow, deliberate, like he wanted it to last. When we pulled apart, neither of us smiled. I drove away feeling like I'd left something essential behind. Back in the city, life resumed its usual noise. Notifications, deadlines, traffic, bars that stayed open too late, and apartments that felt too empty. I told myself it was fine. That whatever Elliot and I had was intense because it was brief, isolated, snow globe romance. Except I kept calling him. At first, it was small things. Made it back. How's the weather? Then longer conversations. Late nights. Shared silences over the phone that felt just as intimate as being in the same room. Weeks passed. One night, after a particularly brutal day at work, I found myself staring at my calendar, then at my phone. "Can I come see you?" I asked when he answered. There was a pause. Not hesitation, surprise. "You don't have to," he said. "I know," I replied. "I want to." I drove out again the following weekend. The road felt familiar now. Comforting. When he opened the door, the smile he tried to hold back told me everything I needed to know. This time, I didn't stay in the spare room. What happened between us was unhurried, honest, built on all the things we hadn't said before. No pretending it was temporary. No pretending it was simple. After, we lay there in the quiet, his arm heavy across my chest. "You could do this remotely," he said, almost offhand. "Do what?" "Your job," he replied. "You don't have to be in the city all the time." I laughed softly. "You make it sound easy." "It wouldn't be," he admitted. Then, after a moment, "But it could be worth it." That thought followed me home. Followed me to meetings, to sleepless nights, to moments where I caught myself imagining a different life, one with quieter mornings, stronger coffee, and a man who felt less like a risk and more like a return. I didn't decide anything right away, but for the first time in a long while, I stopped running. And that, I realized, was already a kind of choice. The idea didn't leave me alone after that. It showed up in the quiet moments when I was standing on the subway platform, when I was microwaving dinner for one, when I caught myself checking my phone even though I knew Elliot would be asleep by then. The city felt louder than it used to, sharper around the edges. Like I'd turned the volume down while I was away, and now couldn't turn it back up without flinching. We kept seeing each other. Not constantly, not recklessly, but intentionally. Some weekends I went out there. Other times he came to the city, awkward and a little overwhelmed, like he didn't quite trust the buildings not to fall on him. I showed him my favorite coffee place, the park I pretended was relaxing, the apartment I'd never fully settled into. He noticed things about me I hadn't realized were visible. "You don't breathe here," he said once, standing by my window at night, looking down at the street. I frowned. "What do you mean?" "You're always braced," he replied gently. "Like you're waiting for something." That one landed deeper than I expected. The real shift came a month later, during a call with my boss. A routine check-in that turned into a casual comment. "We're expanding remote contracts," he said. "If you ever want to relocate, now's the time." I sat there in silence after we hung up, my heart thudding so loud it felt like it echoed. That night, I called Elliot. "I need to tell you something," I said. "Okay." he replied, instantly serious. They might let me work remotely. Full time. Another pause. Longer this time. And he asked, and I don't know if I'm brave enough to actually do something with that. He exhaled slowly. Joseph, I don't want you to give up your life for me. I wouldn't be, I said. I'd be choosing a different one. We didn't make a decision that night, or the next, or the one after that. Instead, we talked about expectations, about fears, about the ways we'd both been burned by people who promised more than they could give. I don't need forever, he told me once, voice quiet. I just need honesty. That I could give. Spring came quietly to the village. Snow melted into mud, then grass. The road stopped feeling like a thread and started feeling like a path. One weekend, while helping him fix a fence, I caught myself humming without realizing it. He noticed. You're happy, he said. I looked around at the trees, the sky, the man beside me handing me tools like we'd done this our whole lives. Yeah, I admitted. I think I am. The paperwork took weeks. Conversations with friends took longer. Some people didn't get it. Some warned me I was romanticizing an escape. Maybe I was. But when I finally packed more than just a weekend bag, when I stood in my apartment surrounded by boxes, I felt something unexpected. Relief. I arrived at Elliot's house on a clear morning, then heavier than before, chest lighter. He was waiting on the porch, arms crossed like he didn't quite trust that I was really there. I stepped out, and he didn't say anything at first, just pulled me into a hug that felt different than all the others. You stayed, he murmured. I did, I said into his shoulder. It wasn't a grand ending. No dramatic music. Just two men standing in a quiet place, choosing each other without guarantees. And somehow, that felt like the most solid connection I'd ever had. Living somewhere is different from visiting it. That was the first thing I learned. The first week felt like a honeymoon, slow mornings, shared coffee, working from the small desk Elliot cleared out for me near the window. The internet I'd fixed held strong, almost smug about it. I took calls with clients while looking out at trees instead of concrete, and it felt like I'd hacked the system somehow. But reality settles in quietly. There were days Elliot was distant, not cold, just elsewhere, used to being alone, used to carrying things by himself. And there were days I missed the city in ways that surprised me: food delivery at midnight, friends who lived 10 minutes away, the anonymity of being just another face in a crowd. We didn't fight about it at first. We tiptoed. Until one evening, about a month in, when I came home frustrated after a call that went badly. Elliot was cooking, radio low in the background. You okay? He asked. Yeah, I said too quickly. He glanced at me. That didn't sound convincing. I exhaled, dropped my bag. I feel out of place today, like I don't quite belong here yet. He went quiet, stirring the pot a little too hard. You think I don't feel that every day? He said. I looked at him. That's not what I meant. But it's how it sounds, he replied, finally meeting my eyes. Not angry. Hurt. The argument wasn't loud. No slammed doors. Just two men realizing that choosing each other didn't magically erase old habits or insecurities. Later that night, we sat on opposite sides of the bed, the space between us heavier than the silence. I don't want you to stay out of obligation, he said. Or guilt. I'm not, I replied. I'm learning how to stop keeping one foot out the door. That got his attention. He turned toward me. I've been doing the opposite my whole life. Rooting myself so hard I forgot how to move. We laughed, then soft, tired laughter. The kind that loosens something tight. After that, we got better at saying things early. When I missed the city. When he needed space. When the quiet felt peaceful instead of lonely, and when it didn't. I started helping around the village. Fixing routers. Teaching an older couple how to video call their daughter. Becoming Joseph, the internet guy, in a way that stuck. Elliot watched all of it with a fondness he didn't try to hide. One night, months later, we sat outside under a sky so full of stars it didn't feel real. He reached for my hand like it was the most natural thing in the world. You know, he said, I never thought someone passing through would become someone who stayed. I squeezed his fingers. Neither did I. I still don't know what the future looks like in exact terms. Life doesn't work that way. But I know this. I went to a forgotten village to fix a broken connection. Instead, I found one I didn't even know I'd been missing. The first real test came when something broke that I couldn't fix with a reboot. My mom got sick. Not critically, not immediately terrifying, but enough that my sister called me late one night, voice tight, telling me I should probably come back for a bit. Hospitals have a way of pulling you back into old versions of yourself, and I felt that pull instantly. I told Elliot the next morning. He didn't argue, didn't sigh, didn't make it about him. Of course you should go, he said. I'll be here. That should have reassured me. Instead, it scared the hell out of me. Leaving now felt different than before. Before I'd left him. This time, I was afraid of what leaving might wake up in me, that instinct to keep moving, to detach, to slip back into the life where nothing rooted me too deeply. I was gone for 2 weeks. City rhythms snapped back into place faster than I liked. I slept on my old couch. I ate takeout. I sat beside my mom's bed and held her hand, grateful and unsettled all at once. Elliot and I talked every day, but distance has a way of stretching silence thin. One night, after a long day, I admitted it. I'm scared, I said into the phone. Of what? He asked. That this only works when I'm there. That I'll realize I belong here more. There was a pause, then his voice steady, honest. Then you'll tell me, and we'll deal with it. I don't want you choosing me out of fear. That was Elliot in a sentence. When my mom was stable and rolling her eyes at me for hovering, I packed up again. As I drove back, mile by mile, I paid attention to what I felt. Not dread, not obligation, anticipation. When I pulled into the village, dusk settling in, Elliot was outside stacking wood. He looked up, froze for half a second, then smiled in a way that hit me right in the chest. You came back, he said. Yeah, I replied, stepping out of the van. I did. That night, lying beside him, I realized something quietly monumental. Staying wasn't the brave part anymore. Leaving and choosing to return was. I don't know how this story sounds from the outside. Maybe small, maybe uneventful. No grand gestures, no dramatic sacrifices. But for me, it was everything. I went to a remote village to fix the internet. I stayed because one man taught me that connection isn't about signal strength or distance. It's about choosing the same place and the same person again and again, even when you're free to go. It's been a year now. That feels strange to write, because time out here doesn't move the way it used to for me. It stretches, softens around the edges. Days matter more than weeks. Moments linger. The village never changed much, and that turned out to be the point. I still work the same job, just from a desk that looks out onto trees instead of traffic. The internet hasn't gone down since, which Elliot likes to joke is proof I'm never allowed to leave. People knock on the door now when something blinks or stops working. I get paid in homemade bread more often than money, and somehow that feels fair. Elliot and I, we settled. Not into boredom, into rhythm. Morning coffee together. Separate work, shared evenings. Arguments that end in honesty instead of silence. We learned each other's tells when I get quiet because I'm overwhelmed, when he pulls back because he's afraid of asking for too much. One night, late summer, we were sitting outside after dinner. The air was warm, crickets loud, the sky impossibly clear. Elliot leaned back in his chair, beer in hand. You ever think about how close this was to not happening? He asked. All the time, I said. If the internet hadn't gone out, he continued. If you'd said no to staying. If I hadn't walked over that first day. I smiled. If you hadn't brought me that coffee. He laughed. That's what did it, huh? Absolutely, I said. I'm shallow like that. He reached for my hand, thumb brushing my knuckles in that absent-minded way that still makes my chest tighten. Not with nerves, anymore with certainty. Later that night, lying in bed, he said something into the dark. I used to think staying meant giving something up. I turned toward him. And now I think staying is the bravest thing I've ever done. I understood exactly what he meant. I didn't lose my old life. I didn't abandon myself. I just stopped running from the idea that something good could be quiet, steady, and real. Sometimes I think about that first drive out here, the dead signal, the empty road, the feeling that I was heading nowhere. Turns out, I was heading home. Not to a place I'd known before, but to a man named Elliot, in a village most people never notice, where the internet works, and so do we.